Chapter 4 releases in just 2 months, and recently the devs have been giving us a bunch of clues about what could be in the next game, including the silhouette of another new character. So today, I'm going to be solving a bunch of Chapter 4's mysteries and its story, from figuring out the truth of the next villain, new info about other characters coming to the game, and possibly, I think, even solving what happened to the Playtime Co creator, Elliot Ludwig. So last week, we got our biggest update to the Chapter 4 ARG yet, where we learned the computer system we were using was adminned by employee Dr. White, and in said computer we learned that there was some kind of incident in the Playtime Co theater, simply called the theater incident, with a bunch of photos showing the remains of the area, along with a new teaser of the next Chapter 4 character silhouette in some scrambled letters that, when unscrambled, show a message from Harley Sawyer to Elliot Ludwig calling him a backstabber, along with dozens of emails who seem to be from Harley as well. And after all these reveals, I was left with a couple major questions about these clues. Who is this new character and how will they appear in Chapter 4? Who is Dr. White and why are they important? And why did Harley Sawyer call Elliot Ludwig a backstabber at the end? Well, starting with the first question, let's talk about the newly teased Chapter 4 toy. As in this weird glitched out photo, we seemingly see the silhouette of either a jester or clown type character. It doesn't really matter which one they are. But other than that, we don't know anything about them, so who could they be in this upcoming chapter? Well, as we mentioned, along with the reveal of this character, we also learned about some kind of incident happening in the Playtime Co theater relating to a disaster of some sort. Again, as of right now, we don't know much about this event since it's only been mentioned a couple of times thus far, and it's presumed we'll learn more about it as the ARG continues. But for now, we can reasonably theorize that the person responsible for this incident is likely the jester character, since of course a Playtime Co jester or even a clown would only make sense in the theater of all places, where people would go to be entertained, and plus, why else would they be teasing this character and bringing back the Playtime theater of all places? It would be super random to reveal these two things at the same time, unless, like how all of the other areas of the factory have their own respective monsters guiding through them, the jester was also a part of the theater. To support this, one of the Poppy devs even did an interview with the YouTuber Nice about Project Playtime, which has the theater as a map, where when they were asked about what character they would want to add into the game in the future, they told us they would want to add someone that didn't come out yet, but also said once we saw it, we would immediately agree with them that they have to be in the game. And what better character fits this criteria than a monster that literally lived in one of the Project Playtime maps? Clearly to me, this is enough evidence that the jester was once a toy who roamed the Playtime theater, but clearly something must have gone wrong, causing this mysterious theater incident. And while everything I just said does make sense, it brings up a massive problem. What happened to the jester character and how do they apply to Chapter 4? In Project Playtime, no semblance of a jester is ever even hinted at anywhere, and regardless, the theater, as we could see from the lobby in Chapter 1, is in the first floor of the factory, while Chapter 4's prison is multiple floors in the basement. Where did the jester go from the theater, and how will they matter to Chapter 4? Well, the most likely explanation for these issues is we know the prison area was in some way used as a testing ground for the experiments. They would create and contain the monsters in here while testing their viability before sending them out to their respective locations. We saw with Yarnaby, for instance, a multitude of prison logs carefully tracking his weekly behavior and testing new ideas to get him acting normal after his experiment went haywire. So more than likely, after whatever this theater incident was happened, they probably, to save PR, wiped all branding of the jester and got rid of them from the theater, since they wouldn't want the bad press of whatever they did to loom in that area, and chances are the monster was pulled from the theater along with any other branding and was brought back into the prison for further testing to figure out what went wrong with them, which is likely where we will meet up with them in Chapter 4. That's the best explanation of their appearance in Chapter 4 for now, but another big character we haven't really talked about much is Dr. White. We learned in the newest ARG update Dr. White was the admin and therefore the likely owner of the Chapter 4 ARG computer, but then, who is he and why does he even matter? Well, in previous videos, I mentioned how this computer also appears to be the same computer from the lobby area of the prison in the newest Chapter 4 trailer with the little eyeball thing, meaning assuming this PC does belong to Dr. White, he would have to be the one working in this lobby area, I guess as some kind of prison receptionist or manager. And while this sounds initially meaningless to the story, it actually holds quite a bit of importance, because I mentioned a a handful of times now that we first saw Dr. White in a Chapter 3 VHS tape where he selected one of the orphans from a classroom to come with him, something that was apparently a tradition in Playcare for children to occasionally be selected by Dr. White for an unknown reason. Now, obviously, we can infer White was likely taking the children in for experimentation, since Playcare was literally made as a hub for organic experiment material in the orphan children, but now knowing the prison lobby was likely where Dr. White worked, it makes perfect sense. He was likely in charge of managing who went in and out of the prison. He'd search and find suitable children to experiment on based on their game station logs and behavior, then go up to Playcare on the lift and select those children, bringing them down into the prison where they would become experiments of their own. This would explain why the lift down into the prison was right next to Playcare, so that way they wouldn't have to travel as far, and would also explain why, despite the prison being for experiments and employees only, they still kept the Playcare sky facade in the lobby area to keep incoming children from feeling scared and disconnected from the Playcare. This is most likely Dr. White's role in the factory, and would also explain why we've seen so much focus on the lobby throughout Chapter 4's rollout. But the main point and main reveal at the end of these ARG clues was meant to be that Harley Sawyer apparently had a bone to pick with Elliot Ludwig, calling him in the final letter soft, pathetic, and a backstabber. And in another email from the ARG database, he was asked why Elliot was a backstabber, getting the response, "I know what he did." So what could have Elliot have done to Harley to make him so angry? Well, for now, it's obviously extremely difficult to make guesses since we don't really know much about Elliot Ludwig outside of the fact that he founded the factory and had died at some point towards the end of Playtime Co's career, but we can make a speculative but also super possible guess. See, we know Elliot Ludwig at some point passed away in the factory before the Hour of Joy, and therefore we know Harley can't be blaming him or talking about that. But what I found interesting is last video, somebody emailed the ARG email asking Harley if Elliot's death was his doing in the name of greed and experimentation, where Harley simply told them to stay quiet, likely meaning Harley was involved with Elliot's death. And interestingly enough, while we don't know when exactly Elliot Ludwig passed away, we can at the very least make a good guess, since in this document from the Project Playtime ARG dated July 20th, 1991, they use Elliot Ludwig's name in the past tense, meaning he had to have passed by July 20th, while we can see in Elliot's office that there were drawings of Mommy Longlegs in the game station, who was first created at some point in 1991, meaning he must have died in the first 7 months of 1991. And conveniently, we also learned in the Project Playtime ARG that after the employee Rowan Stoll pointed out suspicious things about the company, like cameras in Huggy Wuggy's eyes, they created the first bigger body ever, Boxy Boo, designed to eliminate him, with his last message being in July of 1991 as well. This means that very shortly after the bigger bodies were created, Elliot Ludwig mysteriously died, conveniently at the same exact time the bigger bodies started being produced, which definitely matters. And to me, this suggests possibly when Harley Sawyer was first employed at Playtime Co and began experimenting on the toys over time, building up to him creating the bigger bodies out of real people, Elliot Ludwig, the do-no-wrong family man with good morals, might have been against his progress, thinking it was malicious, and possibly tried to stop him from using things like the Playcare children to mass produce these experiments. Since we know Elliot was likely a morally good person who made the experiments in order to recreate his lost daughter in Poppy, while Harley and the other employees wanted to do it to increase profits and were willing to do anything to progress it further. So Harley likely then saw Elliot Ludwig, the person who first hired Harley through the Young Geniuses program when he was a child, and gave him this career in the first place, also being well known as an innovationist who liked to invent and progress the future forward, then might have saw him as a backstabber, a weak-minded individual who couldn't handle the dark reality of these experiments and what had to be done in the name of progress to create them. Harley even softly confirmed this in this email, claiming Elliot was taken out for greed and experimentation. We don't know if Elliot was turned into a monster or was just dumped to the side randomly, but one thing seems clear. Elliot Ludwig did not die of natural causes, and the person behind his death seems to be none other than the evil Harley Sawyer.